Sunday.
It's Sunday morning.
I love mornings.
The games are over, and we're breaking it all down. This is your Morning After podcast with all the insight and analysis on the Utes, Cougars, and Aggies. The Morning After podcast with Hans, Scotty, and Lloyd Cole begins right now.
And he gave us an opportunity to come in here and show what we're made of.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, welcome in. It's another edition of your Morning After podcast. We got 3 great games to break down, some other games that we'll take a closer look at as well. Scott Gerard here, as well as Hans Olsen and Lloyd Cole. Gentlemen, happy NFL start day. I'm fired up, man, to see a little NFL later today, but we got a lot of games to break down. How you doing, Hans?
I'm hanging in there, bud. It has been a crazy long weekend. I know it's a long weekend for you. I think the question is, how are you doing? Because you've been on a flight and in a car, and you're just arriving at your front door.
Yeah, I just walked in my front door about 25 minutes ago, got enough time to set up the equipment, and we have been up for about 25 straight hours, and that's all right, though.
And
okay.
Oddly enough, Christian's the one that's complaining that he hasn't had enough sleep, oddly enough.
Yeah. Well, Christian is the one that was late to the broadcast studio. Don't know how this happened.
Well, he was up late, although he did not have to travel on a plane. But that's all right. We'll let it slide. All right. Where do you guys want to start? Utah or BYU? BYU gets the real signature win over the weekend. I think we should start with them. Hans, you were there. You saw it. You called it. You felt comfortable about BYU. You were excited for that game. Did it live up to everything you wanted to in terms of the quality of play?
So Jay Hill's defense showed up, Scotty and Lloyd. And Lloyd, I think I saw your tweet talking about our call on Jay Hill. And, Scotty, you remember I put a lot of weight on him.
Oh, yeah.
That defense. A lot of weight. In fact, I spent pretty much an entire segment saying that this comes down to Jay Hill and his scheme and this defense, and if they're going to show up. And, dude, they showed up. Holy cow. They were stout, and they were strong. So it was interesting how the game evolved, you guys. BYU comes out defensively, and they just start throwing pressures at that Preston Stone. And as you guys know, I had talked with one of the voices of that broadcast, of the SMU broadcast. Like we did a, away from the mic kind of thing and just, hey, this, that, and the other thing. And he said, oh, no, we're fully expecting Preston Stone to take all 4 quarters. I don't think there's going to be a rotation. He's like, I think it's just going to be Preston Stone. That's what people are expecting. After the second series with BYU and all their pressures, and Preston was getting hit and crunched in the pocket, and there was no escapability, and the pocket was collapsing. And a lot of that was Blake Mangelson and Jack Kelly, those two. Yeah. So remember those 2 names, Blake Mangelson and Jack Kelly. They were working in tandem to collapse the pocket. And they had to take Preston Stone out. And they put Kevin Jennings in. And then there was still really solid lane containment and lane rushing, and there was a lot of scrambling, and there was a lot of quick throws, and there was nothing, guys. And then we talked about that R.J. Maryland, the tight end. He had 1 catch for 2 yards.
Yep.
And there was, I think it was a platoon duty. You saw Isaiah Glasker, who was on him at times. You saw the big knockdown in that fourth quarter drive by Taggart. You saw multiple guys that locked on him and ran with him. Now, having Preston Stone off the field, who has the better connection with R.J. Maryland, was probably good to see those numbers drop. But the defense showed up, and Mark Collins had a spectacular interception. As SMU was driving, he broke off a route. We got to talk to him about it in the post game. He broke off of it was a post, and handed his guy off to a safety and jumped a wheel route based off of the look of the QB's eyes, and toe tapped as the rest of his body was out of bounds, kind of leaned back and tapped his heel as he was going out of bounds. Beautiful interception. There were guys that were just coming up so big. Harrison Taggart had a much better game, and it was all BYU's defense, man. They were great, and it was so good to see it happen.
Well, there was, we would spend a lot of time talking about spying Jennings and who could have the ability of being able to track him down. And I was in and out of the game. I had a lot of responsibilities talking to other coaches and players getting ready for our pregame. And I'll go back and take a closer look at this game. But there was a play where Jennings rolls out to the right and Jack Kelly tracks him down from behind. And I was just like, whoa. Like, Jennings is a full-fledged stud, and Kelly has the right angle and just absolutely like a freaking missile wraps him up, brings him down, and it was real. I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, there's your guy right there.
Yeah, they talked about that closing speed on that broadcast.
And he was going from his right to left. Is that the play, Scotty?
Yep.
He was coming off his left side.
Yep.
Yeah, Lloyd, I think you even texted me on it and said, geez, Jack Kelly looks really fast. And, Lloyd, Jack Kelly is really fast, and I didn't talk enough about it. I thought Isaiah Glasker might be that guy that really contains him out, but Jack Kelly was a man out on that field taking care of those quarterback rush lanes.
Yeah, I'm going to say, by the way, this is why you listen to these two on Monday through Friday, because you mentioned, you talked about Jay Hill, all that, you said it was going to come down to this Jay Hill defense, and Scotty, you talked about it as well. You said if they go with Preston Stone with that, with that SMU offensive line, like, they are going to get to him, and they did. I mean, they sacked him 3 times, and I thought to myself, I was like, I don't think it was obvious that Jennings was the more impactful quarterback. Like, he was the one that was able to do the most, and they quickly made the decision for the Mustangs that you need that Preston Stone isn't the one that's going to do it, because they were all over him, and that defense. I mean, that was seeing Jay Hill come off the bus. I know you guys have seen the video of him coming off the bus with his wife Sarah. I'm telling you, it was like, man, it just, like, that guy is such an unbelievable dude. He's an unbelievable head coach. It was so good to see this team go out there. I mean, big time, underdogs against this SMU team. I mean, it was expected that they were just going to blow their doors off, and they go down and only allow 15 points and no touchdowns. Like, that's impressive.
So, you may have heard, this is what happens.
No touchdowns, yeah.
This is what happens when you get me and Hans going at 7 a.m. in the morning, and we've both had long days the day before. You heard me crack my rock star, and then about 30 seconds later, I'm assuming that was a monster that you just cracked.
That's my boy.
Yeah.
You know your boy.
Is it a green one?
It's a green monster.
Yeah.
I felt your energy come into my ear, and I was like, I'm going to match my boy's energy, and we're going to kick this thing up a notch. Hey, because it's the Morning After podcast, and nobody listens, do you guys have a second for story time about Jay Hill?
I'd love story time, yeah. Let's do it.
Is this something that we need to do right now, or is it something we should tease for later?
Yeah, you know what, Lloyd? We could tease it for later, and I'll tell the story.
You mean like for Monday or for later in the
tease
podcast?
For later in the podcast.
Later in the podcast. I'll do it at the end of the podcast.
Okay.
But because it's a personal story, but and it's something that happened, and I had to have a call with Jay, so we'll talk about it at the end of the podcast.
This is a free-flowing conversation, so we're not restricted by any rules.
No, we're not.
This podcast.
No, you can go with it. Go with it.
No. We'll tease it.
Okay. Because I do want to get through this. I wanted to mention some things on the offensive side, because I know that BYU fans are probably a little bit bound up with what happened offensively, and you're already starting to see a lot of commotion about the offense and why is it sputtering, and they're going to have to be better, and Aaron Roderick's play calling, and blah 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 blah, and on and on. And I keep coming back to, and people want to know, well, why is it Jake Retzlaff? And why when you had two quarterbacks, and why didn't you bring in a more proven product? And why haven't you recruited a better quarterback that you have more trust in? Just stop it. Stop the noise, man. Like, Aaron Roderick has made the decision he's made with Jake Retzlaff. He's not just going to change it all willy-nilly and go to Gary Bohannon and throw away everything that he fought through spring and then through fall camp, and leaving the quarterback competition on until the very final minute and then going with Jake Retzlaff. Now, we can have this conversation if they start losing because they're putting up 10 points and the offense is completely stalling and it's just getting really ugly in conference play. We'll start to have this conversation. But what I would say is just let Roderick continue to cook with Jake Retzlaff and see if he can build him into a Jaron Hall or a Zach Wilson or just a suitable quarterback in Big 12 play that can get you what you need. And I agree, you're going to have to match that energy through the Big 12, and you're probably going to have to find 32 to 38 points at times to get wins because you're going to see some of those offenses. But just give Aaron Roderick room because he's made this decision. He's the one that's built multiple NFL quarterbacks. And I, for one, am going to sit back and say, all right, he made the decision. I'm going to give him time. And listen, guys, if the defense holds up, and they continue to win, how much room have we given Kyle Whittingham through the years doing exactly that?
Yep.
If the defense can hold up their end of the bargain and they can win, I am going to give them all kinds of room to continue to fight defensively. But that does put a lot of weight on Jay's defense.
That is not how I expected to have a talking point week 2 of the season, that we're saying that BYU's got to lean on their defense to get them through. Now, here's the thing. They got Wyoming, so you beat, obviously, who you're supposed to beat in Southern Illinois. You go on the road and beat SMU and give them only their 5th home loss in the last 4 or 5 years. And they went undefeated last year at home, so that's a big win for BYU. And now you got a Wyoming team that lost the first game of the year and then just lost to an FCS team yesterday into the Idaho Vandals. And so BYU goes to Wyoming, where now they'll be heavily favored against a Wyoming team that's really fallen flat under their new head coach. And the Cougars are really well within the striking range of going 3-0 to start a season that, Hans, you and I were both very concerned that they might start 1-2. And here they are knocking on the door and should be 3-0. And my goodness, I know we like to nitpick, and you and I can nitpick a little bit, and we will. We'll take a closer dive as the week goes on about what BYU's got to be better at. But Cougar fans, hey, don't be punching a gift horse in the mouth. Like right now, this is as good of a start as you could possibly have hoped for.
Yeah, I agree, and they absolutely should get that win and a good 3-0 start for a second year in a row. Where, you remember last year, 3-0, it came to the head with the win against Arkansas.
Yeah.
Because you had Sam Houston and then Southern Utah, and then you go to SEC country and you get that Arkansas win and you're 3-0. And you remember all of us were just pumped about what this BYU team could be, and then they couldn't find 3 wins to make a bowl game from that point. So that was a real lesson for me, and I take a lot away from these 3 games, but Kansas State is going to tell us a lot out of the gates for BYU. And I do believe going to Laramie next week is going to be a nice tune-up game. One note, guys, and then we can move on. Worried about LJ Martin. I don't know the depth of his injury, but he went out in the first half of that game. Everything was clicking offensively with LJ.
Yeah.
It was all looking real good. And LJ went out, and they replaced him with Hinckley Rapati, and Hinckley could not get things going. And they replaced him with Miles Davis, and Miles Davis could not get things going. And they brought in Enoch Nawahine, and Nawahini could not get things going. LJ Martin is a real piece of that engine. If you don't have LJ Martin, it's just not as productive. So fingers crossed he's okay and we see him back in Laramie.
From your years,
outside of that,
from your years of doc talk, is there any indication you may have or any speculation? And again, I'm just asking you 1,000% to speculate. But what did you see there?
Dr.
Looked like
Hand,
an ankle.
what did you see?
It looked like a doctor.
Doctor.
Looked like.
And doctor.
Tell us what you stay. Are you staying at a Holiday Inn Express right now?
Actually, no. I am at. It's called the Signature in San Jose, California, and this one was on my dime, boys. So I am probably getting a disease from the floor here. It's hideous.
Yeah, we're going to need you to not come into the studio. But go ahead. Continue on. Sorry.
I've already got a strange itch under my armpit that I don't like. But, Scotty, I saw a video of him in the tunnel talking to Tom Holmoe, and he was on crutches, and it looked like he had a compression boot on. So my guess is it's an ankle, maybe a high ankle sprain. It's just going to depend. I don't think it was a break.
Yeah.
At least I'm hoping it's not a break. But then there are sprains that are equally as damaging, if not more damaging. So I don't think it's as significant as maybe some of the sprains. And again, this is full speculation because he did spat it first. And he was moving on the sidelines. We got our reports from Mitch Juergens on the sidelines. He was moving around on the sidelines, and then he went back into the tent, and that's when they made the decision at some point around there to pull the plug and say no more today. So my heart and gut kind of tells me that he might be back and available for Kansas State, but I don't want to get anybody's hopes up.
Okay. All right, well, BYU starts the season 2-0, and now we'll go to lovely Laramie, Wyoming, Hands. I know you're looking forward to making that trip coming up next Saturday. So much so, I think you're day tripping it, aren't you?
I am. I'm going to watch Rock's game Friday night, and I am taking Amanda. She's going to do the trip with me, and because those long, lonely roads, Scotty, it's always nice to have a good woman by your side.
On I-80, yep.
You need someone to pick the music and hand you the snacks, right?
She's going to do a little hands-free eating.
Hands-free eating, yeah, buddy.
Lloyd, you had the pre and post for Utah. Boy, they started out like gangbusters, and then it happened, something we were all nervous about, as Cam Rising takes a nasty shot, gets pushed out of bounds, receives the business end of a Gatorade cart, comes up holding that finger, and does not return, and that offense just went in the tank after he left the game. Any word on any updates or anything like that? I'm sure Kyle didn't say anything, but what are you hearing on him?
Kyle said it's not serious. We had Steve Bartle, on, and it looked like, it's all obviously it's pretty much all speculation, whether it's a dislocated finger and this is on his throwing hand, or a laceration of some sort on his finger. So Witt said it's not serious, but it's hard to know what to expect. We saw what we had. Isaac Wilson obviously, looked similar to what he did, against SUU. Didn't have any interceptions, which was good. He took care of the ball, but that offense, you talk about coming out like gangbusters. They were up, 23-0. But one of those was a blocked field goal by Van Fillinger and returned by Teo Johnson to make it 23-0. So, but they're rolling, and then Cam goes out. And I took a little bit of heat on this when I tweeted it out, but To be honest with you, I'm going to stand by it. Like it was tough seeing because Cam has dealt with so many injuries. You know, he got a little bit of pressure and he's scrambling to the outside, and he had a defender closing in on him that was obviously faster than him because he had to try to stiff arm him to keep him back. And as he's going out, almost out of bounds, he kind of jumps up in the air and kind of two hands it and tries to throw it, get rid of it and throw it past the 10 yards or past the line of scrimmage. And then the defender does give him a little bit of a shove into essentially a Gatorade water cart. And he comes up with that finger and I'm thinking to myself, I was like, and I tweeted out, I was like, you can't put yourself in that position, Cam. Like you got to be smarter. And I understand you don't know when somebody's going to give you a push, out of bounds. But the fact that I'm like, you just got to go in the fetal position. You're up 23-0 and you just need to get down. Like you can't do that. And because it completely changed it never felt like it was really in doubt because that defense was so good. But that was obviously we're now back to the is Cam Rising going to play this week talk. That's going to be the talk this week.
Dang.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because we did not ever want to get to this point, and it's going to be a level of speculation going into the Utah State game. And frankly, it may be in everybody's best interest at Utah for him to sit out that Utah State game and then get ready for the showdown the following week because
against Oklahoma State, right?
Against Oklahoma State. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I wish I was listening to Brock Heward on the call. I did not get to see the game. But remember, Brock was sitting in our studio, guys, and he minced no words about Cam Rising, and he went to our time with Peyton Manning, and it's something I don't talk a lot about because we just don't get into a lot of Peyton Manning, but he did a really good job of expressing the most important thing that Peyton Manning had going for him, and that was his availability. And why did he have availability? Well, that's because of his intelligence. And Brock said, Cam, you've got to take a page out of this book. You have to get down like Lloyd was talking about. You cannot take these hits. This is absolutely ridiculous, and I don't want excuses. I thought it was really well said by Brock Heward.
Yep.
And I did see the video of him slamming into the Gatorade jug and the table falling down and the jug falling off the table and him going down. And yeah, it did look like a late hit. It looked like that dude drug him out of bounds.
Right.
There wasn't a flag on that, Lloyd?
Nope, no flag. No flag.
Like
they reviewed for
drug him out.
Yeah, they reviewed for intentional grounding, but there was no flag. Obviously, they couldn't review that, but there was no flag for a personal foul.
Jeez. That looked
I thought it was, but you just can't put yourself in that position.
No, exactly. There's no chance. No, you cannot, and that's frustrating to me.
Like we talked. I talked about it with Christian. Like he just doesn't have that turn it off. Like whether it's the first quarter and he needs to get that extra 3 yards or the fourth quarter. He's going to do it. That's who Cam is. He is a gamer, and he just can't turn it off. He doesn't have. I don't think he has that ability.
Well,
like by the way, he had a run like a 25-yard scamper that was, it looked different than that when we saw him run against SUU. He looked actually like the Cam of old. Like you saw him run, I'm like, wow, he's got a little giddy up. There's an extra gear right there suddenly. But he's got to be smart. Yeah, they're going up against Utah State, and they can get away with not having them because that defense is so good. But then you got Oklahoma State, and then you've got Arizona. Mm-hmm. So the good news, like he is going to be back. It's not as Kyle said, it's not serious, but it's something. He had his 2 fingers taped up. Essentially, I think essentially they said, okay, you're in street clothes. He came out of the half and was in street clothes. He went into the locker, came out there in street clothes, and go ahead, Hans.
Well, I'm curious, Lloyd. Did Utah? Did they start to identify Mekhi Bernard as a bulk carrier? Because I know, what do you have? Almost 22 carries. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was like
what it was,
18 carries for 118, and by the way, it was still pretty tough sledding for their run game. They really couldn't get it going for the
That's
most
a good
part.
Average, though.
It is. It was 6.2. He had obviously a long of 30. The line finally, when it came down to where it came down, it was like 23-12, and they needed to chew some clock. And obviously, Isaac Wilson in that offense, they weren't moving the ball. I don't know what happened. They all of a sudden they had a drive that took. Yeah. It chewed the clock way down. But that was finally the first drive they were able to get. But I'll tell you what. Special teams, you had a unhappy Kyle Whittingham. The special teams, they missed 2 field goals and an extra point. So you had essentially, what was that, 7 points? Yeah, 7 points.
Yikes.
Right there.
Ooh, I did not know that.
Not a good day at the office for Cole Becker. And
no. Yeah, this big kicking recruit they brought in from Colorado.
Yeah. That's not great. And when I saw that second field goal go wide, I was like, ooh, this isn't gonna end well for him. The other question I had for you, Lloyd, I saw Mike Mitchell leave the game with an injury. Did he come back, or did he? He
did.
Not? Okay.
Yeah, he did come back. That was early on. In fact, you audibly heard him scream on the TV. He was in apparently so much pain when he was down on the ground. But they did. They taped up the foot, the ankle. They taped him up, and he was back out there. But for the most part, nobody was really all that effective outside of Bernard. Bernard did eventually gash him a little bit, but I think there's still some questions on that offensive line a little bit. I don't think they were able to open up the holes quite like we were expecting.
Hey, Scotty, I wanted to tell you this just based off of what you're talking about with Cole Becker. And, Lloyd, I'm sure you saw this too. And Lloyd had mentioned that Jay Hill's defense kept SMU out of the end zone, but SMU still had 15 points. That's because their kicker, Colin Rogers, hit 5 of 5 on field goals. And here were his distances. He hit 53, 52. He hit 48. I want to say 42, and then like a 38, something ridiculous like that. Like, it was over 200 yards of field goal kicking for this guy. He hit 2 50-yard plussers in that game. And I'm sitting in the booth and I'm looking at where they're lining up. And that's why when Kalani went for it on that 4th down, and it was that pitch to Miles Davis, like if they don't convert on that play, they're
in field goal
5
range.
or 10 yards from being in field goal range, and this outcome is probably different. So you got to figure out whatever it was with Cole Becker, because, Lloyd, you know as well as I know, there are going to be some tough crunch games where Utah's going to have to have a kick from him.
And if you don't have Cam Rising that's able to operate the offense the way he does, you need it. You're going to need it, because you're going to stall out, and you're going to need somebody that can put some points on the board. Absolutely. But I will say that I mean, as expected, that defense was so good.
Yeah,
that defense was phenomenal.
We're piling on Utah pretty good right now, but we do need to give love to that defense. And I know they gave up some plays late, but for the most part, they were just flat out dominating in that game, and they're going to need to lean on those guys a lot here, especially if Cam's going to be out for a bit.
Yeah, Connor O'Toole his hair was on fire. He was he was pressuring. He had 2 sacks. He had a strip sack. And Van Fillinger, he had a sack as well. You had Nate Ritchie, who had, led the team with 9 tackles. That team, that defense is they're so good. They really did bottle up Finn. Like, he couldn't do anything.
Well,
they bottled up the run game too.
Yep. Yeah, and Dave Aranda, I think, is in some serious trouble. There was a weird situation there at the end of this first quarter. And I know you tweeted out about it, Lloyd, but I was sitting there watching that game with some coaches and just kind of preparing for the Utah State game. And the clock is running down. Baylor does not need to run a play, Hans, at the end of the first quarter. And again, it's first half. It's kind of meaningless, but it was just like, wait a minute, what are you doing? And Dave Aranda panics because they're having all this miscommunication out on the field. He calls a timeout with 1 second left in the first quarter when they didn't need to. The play clock had like 10 seconds left on it. He can just let it go right into halftime or into the first quarter and start up. He's got a built-in timeout there with the quarter change. And yet he still kind of freaks out and calls a timeout with 1 second left in the first quarter. It's like, what? What are you doing? And
by the way, your boy Brock pointed this out because, obviously I'm not at the game, but he's there. He's like, hey, go to, because his partner asked him, he's like, you think they try to hurry up and run a play? And he's like, I wouldn't. He's like, they're in down with the muss right now. You're going to flip sides on the field and you'll be away from the muss. It'll be quiet, a little bit quieter for you. And all of a sudden they hurry up and try to snap a play, but they call the timeout. Like, it made no sense. All you do is you get away from the muss, you let the quarter expire, and then you run a play. But yeah, it was so baffling that he called a timeout when he didn't need to.
And then that going for 2 in the it was in the third quarter to try to cut it to a 23-14 game instead of a 23-13. Essentially taking it from 10 to 9, but instead it stays at 11. I mean, just some really baffling things that were done there by Baylor.
And their time was, obviously not in their favor in that fourth quarter. They was running down. This was after they had chewed the clock down. There was and it's because Morgan and his defense is so smart. There was a substitution that happened, and of course, Utah has to substitute as well. And Van Fillinger slowly jogs off the field, and I'm telling you, it shaved 20 seconds off.
Hey,
it took him like 20 seconds to get off the field.
Hey, I saw a few really good plays. And Hans, I'm be curious to see when you go back and look at the film on this. But I saw some really good play from Van Fillinger. And again, I was kind of in and out of the game, and I'll take a closer dive into the game as well. But Van looked like he was playing a man's game yesterday.
Was he, Lloyd?
Yeah, he was. He was so fast. You talked about Jack Kelly closing in on Jennings, right? Van Fillinger closed in on the outside on Finn. Like, he closed on him and got him. Like, and got him out of bounds. Like, he was flying around. Him and Connor O'Toole, they were unbelievable in that game. Like, they had a really good game.
Lloyd, 2 things just before we jump on, Scotty, and move on here. Just really quick, Lloyd, 2 things. Are we going to need to start to have a conversation about QB number 2 and maybe trying Sam Heward or maybe trying Rose, or are you comfortable with it being Isaac Wilson if it has to be Isaac Wilson coming up next week in Logan? Because, we saw what happened, and we're going to talk here about this Utah State USC game, but going to Logan and having a freshman quarterback, it could be obviously Utah's defense is going to be the taskmaster, and they're going to get things done, but do we need to start having that conversation with the backup quarterback?
I think that conversation is definitely can be had. Kyle Whittingham, so in his post game press conference, excuse me, in his post game press conference, he said he said Isaac essentially is still the man. Like he is the backup. That's his guy. The question becomes that he mentioned is who is his backup if Cam's not going. Who's his backup? And that'll be. It sounds like it's going to be a battle, obviously, between Rose and Heward. I don't know what I've seen. I don't think we're seeing what Isaac Wilson did in the fall. Like this isn't showing me what would win a backup quarterback. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that, Hans. But what I'm seeing right now, like you're getting pretty close. Like that offense has been extremely stagnant every time he's been on the field. I mean, he wasn't able to do anything against SUU. Outside of that touchdown to Caleb Lohner, he wasn't. He didn't protect the ball in that game. He did in this game, but I think that there's a conversation. But Kyle he says that Isaac Wilson's the backup. That's the guy. They're putting their eggs in that basket right now. Now there's a battle, but I don't know how long that. I gotta imagine that leash is getting shorter and shorter as we go. So now that this week they'll probably try to make sure and just find out exactly who his backup is.
I don't think, and again, this is going to sound harsh, but understand, I think Isaac Wilson will eventually become a really great quarterback. I don't doubt that one bit. But as of right now, you can't tell me that Sam Heward isn't a better option than Isaac Wilson right now. Now, again, the upside for Isaac Wilson is through the roof, and he has a chance to be super special. I'm not knocking the kid. I'm just saying he's a freshman. The dude's a biscuit toss from being out of high school. And
right.
And he's just not there yet. And so you can't tell me that Sam Heward can't do just slightly better than what we're seeing from Isaac Wilson.
And we're not talking about a team that it's like, oh, yeah, let's get this developed and let's see what the future is. We're talking about a team that, no. This isn't that year. Like,
nope.
You get the quarterback in that can win now. Like, well, I'm not about development. I'm about seeing a Utah team go to that 12-team playoff. And so I don't care if you got to sit the future and play the right now. If that's what you got to do it. Play the best quarterback.
This team is stacked right now.
This
team is stacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So don't mess around because one catch to Brant Keithy and, just bad receiving distribution, only 23 passing attempts, and not being able to find the end zone as much as you probably should. It just tells me that you may need to have the conversation, especially if there's something deeply wrong with that hand or there's any type of extended time. Even then, it's like, nah, you know what? We've already now seen it. So make sure number 2 is ready to go to take the reins and not be, oh, he'll get better as the year goes on. Like, you need the best option you've got right now because this is a play team.
Hey, so real quick. I mean, I know it sounds because there's obviously if Cam's out longer than we're expecting, then that's you need him to start. For Oklahoma State. That's no doubt. And I know this conversation is because of the Cam injury. It's had a little bit more of a downer feel to it. But hey, Utah, they're 2-0. They're right where they wanted to be. They're going to enter the top 10 because you had Texas absolutely smoke Michigan, and you had Notre Dame go down to Northern Illinois, and who else? I think we had another upset in there somewhere. Boise State almost beat Oregon, but they're gonna jump into the top 10. I have to imagine.
Well, so, I would think so. Brett McMurphy released his poll. He's got Utah, I believe, at 9, and he's a voter. So, hey, I think there's a real strong chance they'll be there for sure.
Yeah. The last thing, and then we'll go. I mentioned 2 things. Really quick, how did the offensive line look?
For Utah?
Yeah.
Sorry. You know what? They were. I still think there's questions there. they like I said, I mean, we talked about Bernard. He was able to get 118 yards. A little more of that, I think, came in the second half. But I still think and I trust your eyes way more than mine on the offensive line. So when you kind of game film this, I will trust what you see more than what I see. But I still think there's question marks on that offensive line.
Yeah,
I don't think they got the push. They didn't get they didn't open up the holes that I thought they would be possible. I thought it'd be a lot better. And it was better because you did have, Mekhi Bernard, but it wasn't the leap that I thought it would be into week 2.
In my limited viewing hands, I would agree with that. I do think that Utah's got some issues up front, and that's a little concerning because what we expected from Utah, I did not have a lot of concerns on that offensive line, but those tackles are still giving up some pressure, and the run isn't great. Now, I think it was better, and I think that they'll continue to get better, but again, we're nitpicking because we have high expectations for this team. And if they're going to be a college football playoff team, and if they're going to be a Big 12 champion, and you're going into a conference that does feature a lot of great rushing DNs and guys that can get around the edge and can get after the quarterback, they've got to shore that up. And I think they can. I think those guys are talented enough. I think Jim Harding's a heck of a coach, and I think they'll get it squared away. But they got to make sure they get that buttoned up for sure.
Shoot. I'll go back, I'll look at it, and I'll have a take ready for you on Monday.
All right. I walked in my door about an hour ago after getting off a plane and driving back from Logan here to Bountiful, and I watched a absolute beatdown as USC jumped out to a 17-0 lead. Then it was 20-0, and then Utah State just couldn't get anything going offensively against USC and started to show a little bit of signs of life with a chance to go down and maybe make it a 2-score game before halftime. And Bryson Barnes, they're near the 40-yard line, and he's got Jalen Royals running a seam route, and he is open. And, again, you see Barnes load up, fire it in there, and at the last second, a big defensive lineman gets up there, puts his paw up in the air, pops that ball straight up in the air. USC intercepts it. They end up scoring another touchdown. So instead of making it a 20-7 or maybe even a 20-3 game at halftime, it's 27-0, and then it just steamrolls, and Utah State loses that game 48-0. Now, look, I'm not saying Utah State was going to be competitive. I'm not saying they're going to win the game. Not by any stretch. USC was just so much better physically, athletically, speed, everything. But those are the little things that can turn, maybe a 34-10 game into a 48-0 game real quick. And the Aggies never really could recover from that. And Utah State ends up losing badly in the Coliseum. But I will say this, Miller Moss, really good, but he's no Caleb Williams. What USC can do really well, though, is they're playing good defense. They're playing more aggressive than I've seen USC be defensively in a long time, and they can run the heck out of the football. They've got 2 good running backs that both were near 100 yards rushing, and they've got a big, strong offensive line that's super experienced and can really just manhandle dudes. And that, it was a very un-USC like performance because it was about defense and it was about running the football. And I know Miller Moss ended up with a bunch of yards, but really at the end of the day, it was about that rushing attack for USC. And Utah State had no answer for it. They could not get off blocks. They went with a 3-man front to try because they were really nervous about those wide receivers and what they could do down the field. And USC goes, all right, fine. You go in 3-man front, then we're just going to run the football. And they did it over and over and over again, especially early on when they established dominance. And then Utah State had to go back to a 4-man front to slow it down and put a couple more guys in the box. And then that's when Miller Moss got it going through the air game. But honestly, Hans, this is as complete of a USC team. And I'm not just basing it on the Utah State game. I'm looking at that LSU game last week, too. This is as complete of a USC team as I've seen in a while, because now they've got a defensive staff that looks to have things dialed in. They got a group of players that they've always looked good. They've always been talented, but he's got them playing hard and playing super physical. They tackle well in the open field. And so when you combo that with a USC offense that's always going to put up yards and put up points, hey, keep an eye on USC in the Big Ten. They might come out of that conference.
Well, big props to Lincoln Riley, because it's not easy to have something in the tank when you lose a Heisman Trophy winner. And a number 1 overall draft pick. He was number 1, wasn't he?
Yes. Yep.
Caleb? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You lose a number 1 overall draft pick, and all of a sudden you got Miller Moss, who's sitting in the wings, who, by the way, is a USC product, born and raised.
Yep.
Not a transfer.
Did not transfer out.
He was a guy that was sitting in the cupboard that Lincoln Riley went to, that people were kind of surprised with, and here he is through a couple of games, and he's got nearly 700 yards through the air. And he shows a real ability, a real eye, an awareness, and he's clicking. So I'm excited to see how far he can go. But, Scotty, tell me this. Do we need to start talking about Bryson Barnes coming back to Logan now, going against University of Utah, his former team, and what was the availability or the conversation of the availability of Petrus and his injury? Like how much are we going to be talking about that this week?
I think it's a fair conversation to have. I will say that in talking to coaches, they really feared when that injury happened last week to Petrus that it was going to be a 4 to 6 week injury. Now he was close to being ready for this game. They feel fairly confident that he'll be available next week. Now, here's the question. Do you want to risk it against the University of Utah, or do you sit him out and let Bryson have all the storylines this week going up against his former team? Bryson can run this offense, and I know Utah State fans are a little cranky today, but you saw a hell of a defense on Saturday. You're going to see an even better defense coming up in Logan on this upcoming Saturday with the University of Utah. And I don't know if that's the game I want to bring Spencer Petrus back. The season really rests, and I know it sounds weird to say, but I think the overall success of the season is going to come to 2 weeks from now when they hit the road to Philadelphia to take on Temple. And if they can beat Temple on the road, then they'll probably start the season 2-2. And then you got 2 Mountain West Conference games against the 2 best teams in Boise State and UNLV in back-to-back weeks. So you cannot go into that game 1-3. So if you feel like Spencer Petrus gives you your best chance to beat Temple on the road, then frankly, I don't play him against Utah. I don't. And I'm not saying you concede the victory, but you concede the fact that you really need to get that win against Temple, and you really need to be playing at full strength. Now, the great thing about, if there's one silver lining about yesterday on the road against USC, Utah State came out of that thing unscathed. No injuries. Nobody. Ike Larson got a little banged up. He left, but then came back out on the field. So other than that, everybody's healthy. And I talked to the trainer afterwards. He's like, hey, this from my perspective, this game couldn't have gone any better. So no lingering injuries. Sometimes you worry about that in those type of games. But Petrus, I think, will be in a situation where if it was a Mountain West Conference title game or, Boise State to end the season, or you need that win to get bowl eligible, then I think that Petrus could go. But I don't know if they'll let him go. So that remains to be seen. Plus, you know what? I think we all want to see Bryson Barnes go up against his former team.
And he's a more mobile quarterback too. I think he, in that game, I think you want to see Bryson Barnes in that game because that defense is going to be getting after him, and I think you want somebody that can be a little bit more mobile back there.
Yeah. Yep. But that'll be a fun one. We'll be giving away tickets to that throughout the week. So if you want to see tickets to see Utah State against Utah, keep listening all week long, and we will have tickets to give away. So listen for your chance to win tickets to go see Utah State and Utah as Utah makes its first return to Logan since Utah State and Gary Anderson got the big upset win back in, I want to say, what was that, 2012, Hans?
That was in...
I think it was 12.
12? I think it was 12. Yeah.
Yeah,
Was that our guy, Chucky Keaton, at the helm?
Yep. That was Gary's last year in Logan on his first go-around
went
there.
to Wisconsin?
Yep. Yeah, that's right, because Wells took over in 13. Yep. By the way, before we wrap up, big shout-out to Southern Utah. I don't know if we have an RGS remote, but I'm sure Tim's got to be on Cloud 9 after Southern Utah gets the victory over UTEP. So it's the T-Birds getting a win over an FCS team, knocking off UTEP, the Miners, and so congratulations to them with a nice W there.
Also, congratulations to Scotty G's Idaho Vandals as they go get.
They are okay. They held Oregon. They almost beat Oregon, and then they go beat Wyoming.
Yeah, I don't know what they're all about, but they beat Wyoming. And then I did want to give a shout out because one of my best buddies when I was with the Indianapolis Colts was a guy named Ryan Diem. He is an offensive tackle, and he played for Northern Illinois. And he was blowing up my my Facebook timeline with all these pictures. I'm like, what in the hell? Like, what's he doing? Because he was with a group of his Northern Illinois boys. So I pull it up, and Northern Illinois ran Notre Dame off the field. And
so
it's
good.
just another year and another letdown for Notre Dame, and it cracks me up. And I was like, attaboy.
I'm just glad
I actually sent him a text.
I'm glad it happened now and not right before or right in the college football playoff, and when they usually get embarrassed. So that's
Big
good to
12
see.
Big 12 almost had a really bad day.
Yeah.
You had Oklahoma State almost lost. Kansas State almost lost to Tulane.
Did those two come back and win it?
They did. Oklahoma State beat Arkansas 39-31, and Kansas State beat Tulane 34-27.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
my gosh.
yeah.
Yeah, because I know
it was
at one
almost
point, both of them were
really
behind.
bad. Yeah, Kansas did lose. They lost to Illinois, but and Arizona barely they were losing to Northern Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, it was almost a really bad day.
And speaking
but you'd also had Iowa State beat Iowa. So,
yes,
anyways.
on a last second, what was it, 53-yard field goal. And by the way, speaking of the Big Sky, congrats to Mickey Mental. They pick up their first win of the year as they just hammer Portland State 43-16, outscoring the Vikings 24-6 in the fourth quarter. So Mickey Mental and the Wildcats pick up their first win of the year. Again, just hammering Portland State. Pretty good.
Story time?
Oh, yeah, story time, Hans. Let's go.
Story time.
Well, for those of you that have hung on to this point, we do appreciate you. And make sure that you fire out a retweet when you see the podcast, if you see it on Twitter. Make sure that you hit the retweet. Scotty, Lloyd, and I, we're trying to grow this thing. We have fun doing it, but we actually do need to get some listens. But
yeah.
If you have listened this far, then so kind of a funny thing happened. You guys know that I'm just dealing with a lot of different emotional things this weekend. And at halftime, I walked out of the booth, halftime of the BYU SMU game that I'm up there calling with Greg. And I walked out of the booth, and I'm standing kind of in line. You know, they need to have more bathrooms up in those booths.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's stupid.
Yeah, yep.
Urinals are always stacked at halftime, and it's just stupid. So I'm standing in line, and somebody pushes me in the back. I'm like, what the heck? And I turn around, and it's Jay Hill with this gigantic smile, like huge smile. Because, you know, obviously his defense is playing good. Now, he was ticked off because they gave a field goal up right before the half, and so I turn around, and he's kind of got his arms extended, and I grab him, and I give him this big hug, and I'm squeezing him pretty hard.
Geez.
The man had a heart attack.
Hands.
Oh. So then he lets go of the hug, and I'm going to finish the story as to why I grabbed him again, but I grabbed him again and hugged him again. And I think the second hug kind of threw him off a little bit. So I called him, and you guys know what I'm going through. I called him yesterday, and I'm like, hey, Jay, I just want to explain why I was hugging you so hard. I said, on the same day that you had your heart attack and your life was saved, my best friend had a heart attack, and they couldn't save his life. And I had just spoke at the funeral of my buddy out here in Hollister, California, and I called Jay, and I was like, hey, I just want you to know, Jay, like, I hugged you because I was kind of hugging you, and I was hugging my buddy Chris, and I said, and to be able to see you calling a game up in the booth, big smile, your wife standing next to you, who I love, Sarah. As you know, Scotty, she's our
Idaho.
Nampa queen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's our Nampa strong, Nampa queen, and she's fought her own battles. And I told him, I was like, you kind of got the butt into this, bud, because I was just so glad that I could see you, because it's just not how it worked out for Chris and his family. And he goes, okay, that makes sense. That actually helps. Because I squeezed him real
Because meanwhile, I'm over here with broken ribs.
I squeezed him so hard because he had that big, goofy Jay Hill smile on, man. And I'm like, gosh dang it, it's so good to see that smile. And you guys know how it is when you lose somebody and you don't get to see that smile anymore. It's a horrible deal. So to have Jay back up in that booth and then have his defense play as well as they played, and then to have Jay, he was still bitching about his guys giving up the field goal at half. He's like, well, yeah, it was a good half, but man, and I'm like, Jay, it was a killer half. Your guys are collapsing pockets. Harrison's everywhere. Jack Kelly is a dog. He's like, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's just classic Jay, man. I hope people understand what they've got in Jay Hill as a defensive coordinator at BYU. I know that the defense slid at the back end of last season, and they needed to be better. But we've seen early signs this year that they are absolutely going to be better as long as Jay Hill's in the booth.
100%. 100%. All right, gentlemen, let's wrap it up. Another edition of the Morning After podcast in the books. Thanks for listening. Again, please rate, review, and subscribe. And that helps us out. That helps us keep doing it. And it makes us have a little motivation to wake up early or never even go to sleep on a Saturday or a Sunday morning. So we'll be back with you tomorrow, Monday at high noon, breaking down everything a little bit more in depth as Utah, BYU both pick up big victories. Utah State ends up getting roughed up pretty good, but they got a rebound against the Utes coming up on Saturday. But you guys, Hans, you're on the road. Lloyd, you cooking anything today?
Yeah, you know what? We're going to be doing ribs today.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What's this wee stuff? Jessica's going to be doing ribs today.
Yeah.
No. I'm helping out. I'm doing the ribs. I'll be working on the ribs.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I am. We're doing some ribs. Boys want some ribs. Xavier is a rib addict now. He loves the Scotty G method. So we'll be doing some ribs tonight.
All right.
It's really, you know what? The ribs is such a good go-to, by the way. I can't get away. I know I always want to try to do something differently with the ribs and branch out away from it, but it's just so good. So
my neighbor's doing some beef ribs, and I'm going to help him out on that because I've never done beef ribs before, so I'm kind of curious to see how that goes.
That's a touchy thing.
That is.
Hey, how about you do us a favor?
I'm letting him do it, and then if they're good, I'll be like, oh yeah, I really helped out on that. And then if they suck, I'm like, yeesh, man, you really dropped the ball on that thing.
I didn't touch those.
If you're having another neighborhood get together, how about let's not make any more of that crack?
No,
that
I know.
Sugar crack.
I won't make any more.
Just stay away.
Crack. Yeah.
Yeah.
If
that ended up falling on my shoulders. It was, and if you do it, just don't do the s'mores ones because that I can't fight against that beast.
Yeah, you and me both. That's why I will not be doing that, because
that stuff's so
that stuff was so good. All right. Gentlemen, have a good Sunday. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Show begins at noon. Hans and Scotty, Lloyd Cole. It's your Morning After podcast right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This has been your Morning After podcast with Hans, Scotty, and Lloyd Cole. Catch more of the Hans and Scotty Show weekdays from noon to 3 and in podcast form by searching Hans and Scotty on your podcasting platform of choice. This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.